Hello, everybody. A good afternoon, a good morning, or a good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. But for all of you, a very warm welcome to the 7th Annual Asia Pacific Spectrum Management Conference. My name is Dan Kraft from Forum Global, and I'd just like to say how great it is to once again have you all with us here for the event this year. So again, as you will all be aware, the event this year is going to be taking place fully virtually. And over the course of today, tomorrow and Thursday, we have 8 different sessions taking place that are going to be focusing on all of the key spectrum management and spectrum policy issues for the region. And we are all looking forward to what I'm sure are going to be 3 days of really interesting discussion and debate. A quick word on the audience participating at the event, on all of you out there. We're delighted to have more than 700 of you registered to attend the event, representing 88 different countries from across the Asia Pacific region and beyond. So once again, a really fantastic turnout, and we'd like to say a big thank you to all of you for joining us for the event once again, and it really is great to have you all with us. In a second, it's going to be my honor to officially open the conference and to get things started with our opening ceremony. But just before we do that, as normal, as I normally do, I just wanted to mention a couple of things on the logistical side. So first of all, I wanted to give you all a little bit more information about the platform we're going to be using for the event today. Now, I know that some of you will probably have used the platform before, but some of you may not have done. So I just wanted to very briefly run through some of the different areas and the different aspects that we have here. So the platform has been built to not only allow for the panels and the presentations to take place, but also to try and replicate some of the benefits that you would get if you were participating at a face-to-face event in terms of the networking, the interaction, side meetings, and exhibition area and things like that. So I wanted to just run through a few of these areas now to hopefully enable you to get the most out of your time with us during the event. So first of all, I wanted to mention the interactive areas on the right-hand side of your screen. So on the right-hand side, you'll see a bar where you have different areas that you can use to interact with the speakers, with the panelists, and with your fellow participants during the event. So first of all, you have the chat area. So this is where we would like to invite all of you to please, during all of the sessions that are taking place, post your questions for the speakers, post any comments that you have on the discussion, and those will be brought into the discussion. We'll be bringing those across and sharing those with the moderator and with all of our speakers from each session and bringing those into the discussion. We do have plenty of time for discussion at the end of each session, and audience questions is a big part of that. So please do make sure you're adding your questions and your comments using that chat bar on the right-hand side of the screen. Next, the polls area. You'll also see a polls area there. Throughout different sessions on each day of the event, we are going to be asking some audience polls. That'll be multiple choice questions on issues that are related to the topic of the sessions. So please do look out for those, and we invite you to vote in our polls when those go live. And finally, you can see a list of participants that you can view on the right-hand side of the screen. So you can see who else is attending the event. You can scroll through that, and you can actually send then direct messages to people. So if there's anyone you want to connect with, you can send them a message, and you can even invite them to one-to-one video meetings, or you have the ability to schedule meetings for another time during the event, and even schedule group meetings. So please do, again, make use of that. Make sure that you're saying hello to people and networking, and hopefully being able to arrange video calls in that way to meet up with people. Any questions with that or about any of those areas there, then please contact any of my colleagues who are on the platform. You'll see them in the list there. Put a message in the main chat, or you can contact Lula Howard, who is on the platform there, and she'll be able to help with any issues that we have. Next, very quickly, I wanted to mention the different areas that we have on the left-hand side of the screen. So you can see at the moment we are in the main stage area. But you can also see down there we have a networking area, and we will also then have an exhibition area. So the networking area there will be various times during the event that we invite you to use that area for networking. And that is a bit different to the targeted opportunity you have to arrange meetings using the other area I've just mentioned. That one is more of a random matchup area. So there'll be times when we say, please go and use that networking, and you'll be able to click on the button there and then to be linked with somebody else who is on the platform for a very short conversation, and then you can choose if you wanted to exchange business cards. So a different way to network in that way. So again, we'll be giving you more information on that later. And finally, the exhibition area. So the last thing I wanted to mention was the exhibition area. So I think we have 7 different exhibitors at the event today, showcasing different videos, white papers, reports, and other information. So please make sure you do make time to go and check out those exhibition stands and see the information that's being provided there at some point during the 3 days. The exhibition stands are going to be open for the entire duration of the event. So please do try and make sure that you make time to go and visit those during the event. Next, I wanted to say a big thank you to all of our sponsor, partner organizations who've been involved in this event. So you can see the logos for all the different organizations next to me on the screen here. So a really big thank you to all of these, particularly to APT and ITU for their support of the event, and to all of our industry and other partners, which you can see on the screen at the bottom of the slide there. So a big thank you to all of you. Without you, as ever, the event would not have been possible. So we really do appreciate all of your support, and yeah, as I said, for making this event possible to hold. I also wanted to mention our hashtag for the event. So as well as being broadcast here on the platform, the event is being streamed live on Twitter and on YouTube. And for all of you who are joining us in that way, and anybody else who wants to tweet or post messages about the event on social media, you can do that using the hashtag, which is Asia Spectrum. So hashtag Asia Spectrum. So please do use that if you're going to be tweeting about the event. All of the presentations and recordings, all of the recordings of the sessions, I should say, the video recordings of the sessions are going to be made available to you afterwards. So if there are any sessions that you aren't able to follow or that you wanted to recap on, and also all of the presentations, the PDFs of speaker presentations, all of those will be made available to you afterwards. So there's a link actually in the reception area of the platform that you can use to go and view those. Or alternatively, we're going to be sending out an email to each of you immediately following the conclusion of each day's sessions, which will give you the link to go and view those and to find out how to view those. So if you wanted to catch up on anything, you can do that using that link as well. Next, I wanted to move on to the schedule for today. So as I said, we're going to be running things over the course of three days. So you can see the schedule for today. We're going to be starting very shortly with our opening ceremony. I should say all of these times here are on Bangkok local time. So yes, please do adjust that for your own time zone. So we're going to be starting very shortly with our opening ceremony, and we're delighted to have Mario Manovitz and Masanori Kondo with us to officially help us open the event. Following that, we have 3 sessions taking place today, 3 plenary sessions, and also our first set of showcase sessions. So you can see the timing of all the different sessions here, and we hope you're able to join us all for those. You can see the final session is our after-hours sessions. So we're going to be having something that's taking place slightly later for those of you joining us in the Asia Pacific region. It's an after-hour session, and it does mean that we are going to be having speakers joining us from all around the world. And again, if you're not able to join us live for that session, then that will be available afterwards to catch up on. You can see there we have our first showcase sessions taking place today as well. So a little bit about the showcase sessions. These are sessions which are led by some of our sponsor and partner organizations, and an opportunity to go into a little bit more depth on some of the key issues and really have a good discussion around some of those issues. As I said, the sessions are led by our sponsor and partner organizations. So they are going to be running in parallel. So today we have 3 showcase sessions running. These are our showcases that are running today. So the 3 sessions will be running in parallel. So you'll have the opportunity to choose which of those you want to attend. But again, the recordings will be made available, so you will be able to catch up on those afterwards and watch the ones that maybe you weren't able to participate live in as well. So those will be happening today at 4:45 Bangkok time, and I will be giving you more information on that very shortly. So I think that's just about enough for the introductions. A lot's going on today, and this is just day one. So I think it's just about time that we got started. And I would now like to switch and officially open the conference with our opening ceremony. So, Mr. Mario Manovitz, Director of the Radio Communications Bureau at the ITU. Mr. Masanori Kondo, Secretary General at the Asia Pacific Telecommunity. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, a very warm welcome to all of you, and we're honored to have you all here with us for this opening ceremony. So first of all, I would like to now welcome to the stage Mario Manovitz. Mario, welcome, and it's great to have you with us again to open the conference. As ever, Mario, we really appreciate all of the support of you and the team at ITU, both in the Radio Communications Bureau and also here in the regional office in Asia Pacific. I know as well that today is an extremely busy day for you with a number of different speaking engagements, and also that it's actually a public holiday for you there in Geneva. So even more so than ever, we really do appreciate you joining us, and really looking forward to listening to what you have to say. So welcome, Mario, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dan. It's really a pleasure to be here, despite the holiday in Geneva and the busy day, as you know. So let me start by acknowledging Mr. Masanori Kondo, Secretary General of APT, and all the participants and friends that have joined us today. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you all. I would like to start by thanking Dan and Forum Global for their kind invitation to join you today. It is a real pleasure, as I said, for me to be here with you. Ladies and gentlemen, during these COVID times, our world as we know it changed dramatically. Many things that we thought impossible became possible, and long unknown truths became obvious, and they are now difficult to ignore. Solving the digital divide has been on the agenda of several countries and regions for many years, but perhaps its criticality was not as evident as it is now. Today, it is clear. For people to have access to vitally needed services and opportunities, such as teleworking, telemedicine, and distance learning, broadband connectivity is a must. Yet, more than half of the population from the Asia Pacific still doesn't have access to the internet. We have also recognized that digital transformation was a process that companies and governments were slowly undertaking. Changes that might otherwise have taken years to implement in normal circumstances were implemented only in a few months. The pandemic made it visible that transformation was imperative to be part of the digital economy. And finally, the fear of tackling environmental issues and slowing down the economy had vanished. Indeed, lockdowns provided the opportunity to see what benefits would be realized by reducing greenhouse gas emissions and transforming our energy system. As you can see, the global health crisis exposed pressing issues that were not new, but they are now viewed through a different lens. We realize more than ever that ICTs have a special role to play in a new post-pandemic world. Dear colleagues, we must decide what lessons to take away from this period. Radio communication services can provide broadband connectivity to communities and households, ensure access to critical services, promote safety of life on land, in the air, and at sea, allow us to explore the universe and monitor the health and natural resources of our planet. They can open the path to long-awaited transformations. How will this COVID period affect our future decisions at the national, regional, and global level? The increasing use and need of radio-based technologies and the tremendous opportunities for societal development that these technologies provide have since elevated the importance of the radio frequency spectrum and national spectrum management. The increase in demand requires that spectrum be used even more efficiently and that effective spectrum management processes be implemented. These are topics that will be covered during these events. The last World Radio Communication Conference has identified additional frequencies for IMT in the millimeter bands above 26 gigahertz. As a result, there is more than 17 gigahertz of radio spectrum that has been identified for IMT. Millimeter wave bands were proposed for the deployment of 5G applications that require large contiguous blocks of spectrum capable of providing high broadband capacity. The first deployments of these systems are more or less likely to be seen in urban and dense urban areas. However, all these are already on the positive side of the digital divide. Fortunately, the WRC-19 also adopted decisions that support the deployment of other systems like large low Earth orbit satellite constellations, as well as innovative systems such as hubs and others that can help provide broadband connectivity to everyone on Earth, particularly to the unserved and underserved communities that are not addressed by 4G or 5G systems. WRC-23 will now consider the UHF bands in Region 1, as well as frequencies between 3.3 and 10.5 gigahertz for IMT in various regions. Parts of these bands have already been allocated to mobile services or identified for IMT on a country basis. During the next days, this event will discuss the implications of an IMT identification of the UHF, C-band, and 6 GHz band for the rollout of the first 5G systems. Although the use of these bands for IMT in Region 3 is not on the agenda of the WRC-23, decisions taken by other regions may impact the Asia-Pacific region in our increasingly globalized world. The conference will also look at the current decision of some administrations to use the 6 GHz band to expand broadband connectivity using Wi-Fi, which is something that they have the possibility to implement as it does not require a modification to the radio regulations. Dear friends, in the center of the preparation process towards WRC-23 is the balance between the spectrum requirements of different services and the protection of existing users. The need for broadband connectivity is evident. So is the need for many other services that provide significant utility to society. In the ITU, we will soon begin the sharing and compatibility studies that encompass IMT and existing services, such as broadcasting, fixed and satellite services. The search for technically feasible solutions and cost-effective pathways will help us move from rhetoric to action. I count on you to ensure we address jointly the challenges of the digital divide, digital transformation, and environmental issues. There is tremendous demand for the use of radio spectrum. I believe the key lessons that we can take away from this period is that we need to return to the fundamental principles. We must ensure that all services have and can use the spectrum they actually need, that they do so in the most efficient way, and that effective spectrum management processes are implemented towards this end. I wish you an excellent event, and I thank you very much for your attention.
Mario, thank you very much for those words, and yeah, a great way to open the conference with an overview and information on what's coming up with things from an ITU level. So thank you very much for that. Really do appreciate you being with us to help us open the event today. And I know you're going to be back with us later on today to moderate the session that we have running on WRC. So we're looking forward to seeing you back then. But for now, thank you very much again. And as I said, really do appreciate you joining us for this session, Mario. Thank you. So next up, I would like to now welcome to the stage Masanori Kondo, who of course is the Secretary General of the Asia Pacific Telecommunity. So Kondo-san, we've of course welcomed you to this event a number of times previously to speak in your previous capacity as Deputy Secretary General, but I think this is the first time in your new role as Secretary General of the organization. So first of all, I would like to say a big congratulations from all of us at Forum Global, and we really are honored to have you with us here to be part of this welcome ceremony as well. So I really look forward to hearing your thoughts on the issues and what you have to say. So the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Dan. So Mr. Dan Kraft, Event Manager, Forum Global, Mr. Mario Maniewicz, Director, Radio Communication Bureau, International Telecommunication Union, ITU, distinguished guests and participants. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you all. It is my great pleasure to say few words on behalf of the Asia Pacific Telecommunity, APT, at the opening of the 7th Asia Pacific Spectrum Management Conference. It has always been a good opportunity for APT to jointly organize this spectral management conference with Forum Global. I would like to express my sincere appreciation to Forum Global for organizing this event regularly over the past few years and for the excellent arrangements of the event. Last year, the conference was organized virtually for the first time and was successful with a good number of participants. This year, again, it is organized virtually, and I'm delighted to learn that a large number of delegates have registered for this conference. I should say it is an advantage of virtual events. Due to the ongoing crisis of COVID-19, telecom ICT regulators are facing immense challenges to keep the telecom infrastructure active. As a huge portion of data traffic relies on radio communication networks in Asia Pacific, spectrum has emerged as a key and vital resource to keep the radio communication networks active. It is noticed that operators in many countries have reported the lack of sufficient amount of spectrum to keep the services at the desired level during this crisis. You may say it is a wake-up call for the policymakers and regulators in the region. APT has always given importance to improve the policies, regulations, and measures for managing scarce resource, including spectrum, which is now critical for delivering connectivity. In that context, the strategic plan of the APT for 2021 to 2023 has identified a number of distinct action items for this purpose. As you may know, APT has some work programs in this field. APT Conference Preparatory Group for WRC, APG, is the one to prepare for ITU's WRC. APT Wireless Group, AWG, is the one for studying technical aspects of radio communications. Other policy and regulatory platforms, such as South Asian Telecommunication Regulators Council, SATRC, and Symposium on Spectral Management, are to discuss the matters from law, economics, and social aspects. I'm also happy to inform you that APT has launched a new initiative called APT Web Dialogue to respond to APT members' needs for learning something new or widen their knowledge, and it will cover many ICT-related topics. There is a series of dialogues which cover the several topics of spectral management as well. Please visit the APT Web Dialogue website and you will find some dialogues you may be interested in. This conference has been addressing the important issues in spectrum allocation in the past. This year's program includes spectrum delivery for 5G rollout in Asia Pacific, new model for 5G networks, key agenda items of WRC23 for Asia Pacific, bandwidth analysis of the current situation, how spectrum is playing an important role in tackling digital divide, and some best practices. During the next 3 days, participants will be engaging in discussion on these emerging issues in the spectral management landscape. I'm confident that it will provide a good amount of useful information for participants and stimulate their thoughts on what would be a next step to take. I hope you enjoyed these sessions. To conclude, I'd like to once again express my sincere thanks and appreciation to Forum Global, ITU, and all other partners for organizing this 7th Asia Pacific Spectral Management Conference virtually, and to all participants from Asia Pacific and other regions for your presence today. I hope the deliberations during the next 3 days would be fruitful, and I wish you all a successful event. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kondo-san, and I would like to reciprocate the thanks to you and to all the team of at APT for your support of the event and for all the assistance in the build-up and preparation, and of course, personally again to yourself for taking the time to join us today. It really is appreciated. So thank you very much. So that concludes the opening ceremony, but Kondo-san, if it's okay, I'm going to ask you to stay here with us as we are moving straight on to our first session, which is going to be looking at maintaining global leadership, delivering the spectrum to power the continual evolution of 5G. And Kondo-san, you are, of course, going to be moderating that session for us. So without further ado, as I said, we've got a busy day ahead of us, so we would like to move straight onto that. So once again, I would like to extend a warm welcome to all of you out there for the event. I would like to thank again Kondo-san and Mario for both joining us for the opening ceremony. And finally, remind you all to please be as active as you can on the chat with any questions and comments you have for our speakers in this session and throughout the event. I can see there's a number of you on the chat already, so please do continue with that. So I'd now like to pass back to you, Kondo-san, to introduce our first session and our first speakers. So thank you so much, and back over to you.
Okay, thank you, Dan. So let's dive into session one. Session one is maintaining global leadership, delivering the spectrum to power the continual evolution of 5G. So today we have 5 prominent speakers from different background and diverse background, which is a characteristic of Asia Pacific region. So I think that today's like a list of presenters, a list of speakers is well balanced to some extent. So without further ado, let me first introduce Ms. Fan Shen Chen. Fan Shen Chen, Vice Director, Frequency Planning Division, Bureau of Radio Regulations, Ministry of Industry and Information Technology, MIIT, China. She has been working in radio spectrum regulation field since 2002. In the past 10 years, she was engaged in space service. Now her main responsibility in the Bureau includes national frequency planning, domestic ITUR study groups organization, coordinating WRC-23 preparation, and APT radio communication programs in Chinese administration. So I'd like to invite her for her presentation. So, Madam Chen, you have the floor.
Thank you. A good day, distinguished Mr. Maria Manovich, Director of Radio Communication Bureau of MT, and Mr. Masanori Kondo, Secretary General of APT, and all participants. It's my pleasure to take this opportunity to give a brief introduction of 5G spectrum planning and the future development in China, especially about the 6 GHz band. First, please allow me to convey my sincere gratitude to Formula Global to organizing this 7th Asia Pacific Spectrum Management Conference and wish it a big success. Next, please. Yes, thank you. Last year, even affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, we still made significant progress of 5G. Up to now, the mobile of 5G mobile terminal users connection reaches 280 million. In April, the domestic market 5G mobile phone shipment reaches more than 21 million. The following statistic shows the monthly traffic and traffic per subscriber per month from last year to this April. More and more people come to enjoy telemedicine, remote education, 8K ratio TV, intelligent transportation, online office, etc. by 5G. Among kinds of successful applications, we found more and more convergence of ICT and 5G technologies for industrial internet scenario. Next, please. As we all know, spectrum is a foundation of radio communication industry. In a certain degree, it determined the technology trends, commercial mode, and its cost. So it usually takes a long time to prepare new spectrum for the next generation of MT. This slide shows the 5G spectrum timeline in China, for example, regarding to the frequency band 3.4 to 3.6 gigahertz band. The main band this is the main band for 5G spectrum all over the world now. We joined the relevant footnote of radio regulation of this band in WRC 27, which is almost 10 years in advance of the making of domestic frequency plan in China in 2017. Another issue I want to mention is the spectrum coordination. The development of the wireless technology drives the spectrum demand increasing dramatically. The sub-6 gigahertz band has been occupied by many services, as we know. So frequency sharing has become more and more important and a common problem. As the newcomer for many bands, MT should share the spectrum with other incumbent services, for example, space service. Therefore, it requires the administration to give more and more guidelines on the coexistence so as to improve the spectrum efficiency. Next, please. Yes, thank you. In terms of the frequency planning and assignments, long-term spectrum license in totally 680 megahertz band has been issued to the 4 mobile network operators in China, and for 2.1 megahertz band, about double 45 megahertz has been refined. In terms of 5G base stations coordination, we have completed the coordination with more than 10,000 earth stations. That reaches 95% of the total amount of domestic earth stations which are affected by 5G system. Next, please. Thank you. For the practice of spectrum sharing and compatibility between 5G and other services, we push this work forward from 2 following aspects. Regarding the new technology implement, we encourage new technology application, improving spectrum efficiency, and releasing new spectrum. For example, accelerating the digitalization of terrestrial broadcasting, promoting the use of Q, K, and other higher frequency band for the satellite communications. Regarding to the coordination, we established protection list of existing stations and publish coordination procedure to guideline. Publish coordination procedure guideline for mobile network operators to resolve the interference. They can resolve this problem either by replacing relevant equipment, building separate distance, or even transmit the operating frequency band to other frequency band. We also publish documents regarding the equipment radio frequency requirements. For example, we met 3 typical scenarios in 700 megahertz band, and also in 3.5 and 2.6 gigahertz band. Next, please. We know that in order to meet all the requirements such as the AR, VR, UHD video, 5G live broadcasting, video monitoring, etc., we can see from the previous chart that the per capita DOU will grow rapidly in the future. More and more spectrum resources are needed to meet the requirements of various types of application. One thing I should mention that the forecasted data for traffic per user per month in 2030 in this slide is from the ITUR report, but regarding to our prediction, nowadays it will be much higher when the days come. Next, please. Thank you. So why 6 gigahertz is the promising candidate. For different, because we think that for different deployment scenarios, including industrial internet scenario, 5G lead more spectrum in different bands. So we get the idea that they should including below 3 GHz band, mid-band, and military band also. So the next challenge is how much spectrum we still need, and how can we find it? Which band are the most appropriate candidates? As we know that 6 GHz band has more advantages, such as they have good propagation property and large continuous bandwidth, and they have a trade-off between capacity and coverage, etc. Of course, currently we know that 6 GHz band have been used by satellite and microwave system. However, from a long-term perspective, with technology improvement, the above-mentioned services will be moved to the higher band or replaced by the optical fiber. So we say that from our view, 6 GHz band will be available in the future. Next, please. For considering of 6 GHz band for the future, we think it will be pushed forward on 2 levels. First is the international level. As we know that in the WRC19, we have agreed to such a new agenda, 1.2, and China is in favor of the identification of 6 GHz band for MT for different usage scenarios, including industrial internet scenario. With a proper, of course, this should be based on the appropriate technical condition also, and protecting in-Q-band services also within the framework of ITUR. We would like to enhance cooperation and make joint efforts with administrations through bilateral or multilateral coordination. Also, we have actively participated in all relevant working groups in ITUR and also APT and AWG activities. Next, please. Thank you. For domestic level, we are considering to revising the national frequency planning table now, and we are evaluating the possibility of identifying the 6 GHz band to MMT in China. The second point, we also are evaluating to launch the trial of 6 GHz band of 5G system in the near future. We believe that 6 GHz band will be the future spectrum for 6 GHz, for 6G generation or the next generation of IMT. And this is all my presentation today. And thank you.
Okay, thank you, Fan-Chen-san, for your presentation. So as Dan said, if you have any question, please put your question in the box on the screen, so that I will try to pick up as much as possible at the end of all presentation. Then next speaker is, I'd like to invite Mr. James Cameron. He is an authority member with the Australian Communications and Media Authority since August 2013. So he has over 30 years Australian government public policy experience, including senior executive roles in the telecommunications, radio communications, broadcasting, and digital economy fields. He has also held executive positions managing government policies and programs, supporting Australia's arts and sports sector, and immediately prior to joining the ACMA, was Chief Executive Officer of the National Water Commission in Australia. Then, James, welcome to this session, and floor is yours for your presentation.
Thank you very much, Konda-san, and thank you to Forum Global for the opportunity to speak about Australia's perspective on the contribution of spectrum to the evolution of 5G. Before getting into the detail of the spectrum picture, I thought I'd like to provide a snapshot of 5G and mobile networks more broadly in Australia, and you can move to the next slide. As spectrum professionals, it's sometimes easy to focus on the spectrum aspects, but it's important to remember that our focus, government and industry alike, is to deliver connectivity to citizens and customers. And in this context, over 99% of Australians have access to 4G mobile networks, and well over 40% already have access to 5G networks, and at least one of our operators is expecting to increase that coverage to 75% by the middle of this year. For a country the size of Australia, geographic coverage will always be a challenge, and with our land mass of over 7.5 million square kilometres, mobile network coverage extends to about 2.5 million square kilometres. There's clearly a lot of unserved areas of the Australian landmass, and the Australian government has committed $380 million to a Black Spots program to invest in infrastructure to improve that coverage. And so far, that funding has extended 1,200 new base stations across Australia. While in some ways comparisons can be difficult, various global benchmarks also indicate that the performance of our networks is good. A recent GSMA release noted that Australia now has some of the fastest mobile speeds in the world, with a medium 5G download speed of around over 280 megabits per second during the first quarter of 2021, nearly double the global average of around 142 megabits per second. The Speed Test Global Index also recently listed Australia as in the top 10 globally for mobile coverage download speeds. Next slide, please. Radio frequency spectrum is just one of the three fundamental pillars of broadband connectivity, however, with infrastructure and technology also playing critical roles. Australian operators have invested heavily over recent decades in both physical infrastructure and deployment of technology advancements. An effective regulatory landscape, however, is key to supporting efficient industry investment required to promptly realise the benefits of mobile technology, including comprehensive 5G. We continue to work with industry to ensure we have flexible and robust framework to enable next generation infrastructure deployments, as well as flexibility and predictability in licensing. Quoting numbers when it comes to spectrum availability is always tricky, as it depends on exactly what is being described. But to give you a feel for the quantum of spectrum available for terrestrial broadband in Australia, we now have a little under 6 gigahertz of spectrum available under licensed arrangements, and that will peak a little bit over 6 gigahertz by 2024. These numbers are increased significantly if you also include class or unlicensed spectrum, such as 60 gigahertz, which also has the potential to be used for broadband. And it's noteworthy that this figure has increased significantly with the recent release of spectrum in the 26 and 28 gigahertz bands. Previously, we used to describe the amount of spectrum in terms of hundreds of megahertz. Now we need to use gigahertz. Next slide. Of course, the simple quantity of spectrum is not the only factor promoting wireless connectivity. To maximise spectrum utility for wireless broadband, the type of spectrum and the way it is made available is also important. This means that it's important that spectrum in low, mid and high bands is made available through a mixture of licensing solutions to facilitate the use of spectrum for different use cases and by different providers. This includes those operators providing wide area public services, best described as those provided by mobile network operators, those seeking to provide public services over smaller, more localised areas, such as wireless ISPs, and those providing private networks. While a large proportion of broadband spectrum in Australia is made available via spectrum licensing, our term for large area property rights typically allocated via an auction, a significant amount is allocated over the counter for localised licensing. These alternative arrangements are ideal for smaller providers that require the confidence of licensed spectrum, but whose business models don't support large and usually expensive spectrum licenses. To support the breadth of spectrum user needs, the ACMA has recently developed a new licence construct referred to as an area-wide apparatus licence. This new licensing approach is intended to enhance flexibility by providing a scalable licensing solution to support area-wide multi-device deployments. Those areas can be as small as 500 metres by 500 metres in millimetre wave bands. And we've already used AWLs to authorise spectrum in 26 and 28 gigahertz and are considering their use in new mid-band spectrum allocations in the future. Finally, particularly at millimetre wave frequencies, there is an important role for class licensed or unlicensed spectrum. This spectrum provides low cost and low barrier entry solutions for private networks, providing industry verticals and some smaller operators interested in only providing public services over smaller, more localised areas. As part of our arrangements in the 26 GHz band, we've made spectrum available under class licensing. Indeed, we were able to make significant spectrum available in 26 and 28 GHz band under each licensing approach, each optimised for different spectrum and user types. Even with the changes to the regulatory environment, the fundamental basis of radio spectrum management in Australia remains to promote the public interest derived from the use of spectrum. This is not achieved only through 5G and terrestrial broadband services. Indeed, other delivery mechanisms, such as satellite broadband, have critical roles to play in providing benefits for broadband connectivity, especially in a country which represents geographic challenges such as Australia. There are also a vast array of non-broadband services and applications that rely on access to spectrum and contribute significantly to Australia's social and economic welfare. This includes broadcasting services, maritime, aviation and science services. As one of the homes of the Square Kilometre Array, we know this all too well in Australia. And as a regulator, we live and breathe the challenge of determining the best mix of spectrum uses and regulatory arrangements supporting different users that when considered collectively, deliver on our statutory obligations. While difficult, and while acknowledging this means not everyone will be happy all the time, this balancing act is at the core of our responsibilities. Next slide, please. Making spectrum available in a timely manner was identified early as a government priority to enable communications markets to introduce 5G technologies in line with international developments. The ACMA recently conducted the 26 GHz band spectrum auction, a pioneer millimetre wave spectrum band, optimised for delivery of 5G services. This auction of spectrum licences is just one of a suite of licensing approaches the ACMA has introduced in the 26 and 28 GHz bands to encourage a wide range of innovative satellite and terrestrial use cases. And I'm happy to advise that the auction was a success, with almost all lots sold, not only to traditional MNO spectrum licensees, but also to two relatively newcomers to the spectrum licensing environment. Next slide. We're also currently preparing for allocation of the 850 MHz expansion band and 900 MHz band by auction later this year. Given the relative scarcity of bands available for broadband below 1 GHz, we expect there will be considerable interest in this auction. We're also looking at mid-band spectrum again, with replanning phase for the 3700 to 4200 MHz band concluded with the release of an outcomes paper in January of this year. A key result of this process was the plan to make available in the short to medium term additional spectrum in the 37 to 4000 MHz band for wireless broadband. Optimising spectrum and apparatus license arrangements in 3400 to 3575 band, adjacent to the 3.6 band auction in 2018, also continues to be a priority. This is expected to result in more efficient use of spectrum and a reduction in deployment costs, supporting the implementation of 5G services. In addition to considering the use of new frequency bands previously unused for wireless broadband, we expect that many bands already available for broadband in Australia will be refarmed over time by incumbent users for 5G technologies. The existing technical frameworks provide flexibility for licensees to reuse spectrum and adopt new technologies within a broad technical envelope. However, active or advanced antenna systems are increasingly being deployed in both 4 and 5G wireless broadband networks. While providing increased spectrum utility and enabling use of the millimetre wave bands, AAS has tested existing technical frameworks, requiring them to be revisited to best enable the technology to be introduced in lower bands. And we've established a program to review these existing technical frameworks to ensure they're suitable for 5G, and plan to undertake this work in parallel with the introduction of new bands. While we are confident that the ACMA spectrum management decisions have played an important role in the success we have experienced in Australia regarding wireless broadband and 5G, like all regulators, we are alert that we need to remain vigilant to ensure that new spectrum regulation doesn't become a dampener on services and benefits that strong broadband industry can deliver. Engaging constructively and often with domestic and global stakeholders is critical, including the opportunity to participate in forums such as this. And finally, I did want to conclude with some final comments on our region and its engagement with the global spectrum environment. As you all know, the role of regional groups such as APT are becoming increasingly important in international discussions at the ITU in general and at WRCs in particular. We're obviously well represented in such forums through the APT and APG being ably led by Mr. Kondo and Dr. KJ Wee, respectively. And I want to state Australia's appreciation and support for these institutions and their leaders. While the APT and APG are effective, this relies on our continued support for these groups and for us all to strive to ensure that the Asia-Pacific region remains a strong and coherent voice in international discussions. This can be challenging at times given the diversity of our region, but it's important, and with goodwill and sometimes compromise, we can continue to do so in the future. And thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, James, for your very concise and informative presentation, as well as good warm words to APT and APG. So we will do our best for that. Then next, I would like to invite Dr. Pratom Surinam from Thailand, NBTC. So Dr. Pratom Surinam received a PhD in technology management and economics from Chalmers University of Technology in Sweden. He also held bachelor and master degree in economics. He now serves as a senior economic expert at the Office of the National Broadcasting and Telecommunications Commission, NBTC, in Thailand. His main responsibilities focus on economic regulations. His recent experiences include spectrum designs and auctions, competition, spectrum refarming, and price regulations. He currently works on the preparation of 3.5 gigahertz band and the spectrum auction that will be held in the early next year. So with that, I'd like to invite him for your presentation. So Dr. Pratom, you have the floor.
Thank you, Kondo. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is my great honor to participate in the panelists today. And I would like to thank the organizer ITU and APT for inviting me to participate in this forum. For the topic that I would like to share is 5G development and use cases in Thailand. Next, please. My talk would cover 6 topics, as you can see from the presentation outline. Let's start at the first topic, spectrum auction and 5G roadmap in Thailand. Next, please. And Thailand now released 3,220 megahertz of spectrum, and they include low, mid, and high bands. And we released 2,100 megahertz in the year 2000, and followed by 1,800 and 900 in 2015. We also organized the latest auction on February 2020, or last year. It was our first time multi-band auction. It includes 700 megahertz, 2600 megahertz, and 26 gigahertz. Next, please. From our multi-band auction that includes 2600 megahertz, which is one of the major bands that can implement 5G technology. Therefore, 5G implementation plan was started. The implementation of 5G technology is very challenging task for Thailand and for many countries. And it is the first time for Thailand to be one of the very first countries that implement this technology. We're fully aware that the CPE might not be many for consumer to choose. Network equipment is still non-standalone. We also thought that 5G is a technology for vertical industries rather than consumer market. Therefore, we set network rollout requirement at the industrial area or the Eastern Economic Corridor area to be our first priority, and 8 smart cities as the second priority in network rollout for our multi-band auction. In addition, we are aware that 5G technology is at the very early stage of development. The use cases will be rare, and will be vary country by countries based on country competitiveness and resources. The NBTC and the Bank of Thailand conducted a study on potential use cases in major industries in Thailand. We found that healthcare, agriculture, and manufacturing are the industry that will bring the most impacts to Thai economies. And the NBTC and the Ministry of Digital Economy raised this to the National 5G Committee to consider the pilot project to promote 5G technology. I will talk more in detail later in my presentation. Next, please. And this page, these figures just give you the idea of network rollout obligation that I already mentioned. 50% of EEC area, the 5G network should be covered within 1 year, and 50% of populated area, the 5G network should be covered in 8 smart cities within 4 years. And next, please. And now it's already 1 year and 3 months after the winners got the spectrum licenses. They did a very impressive work on network coverage, as you can see. All of the 77 provinces are covered by 5G technology, and more than 50% of the populated area in Bangkok and EEC provinces covered by 5G network as well. So 5G network helps Thailand to improve download speed. As you can see, the download speed of 5G is almost 14 times compared to the 4G technology. And 5G download speed alone in Thailand now is 162 megabit per second, and Thailand is ranked top 10 as well for the 5G speed. And next, please. And the NBTC published the IMT Spectrum Release Plan 2020 to 2023, and the next auction initially scheduled not later than the second quarter of 2023, and this auction will include 1800 megahertz that was left over from the last auction, 55 megahertz, 5500 megahertz, and also 28 gigahertz. And next, please. And now we are working on refarming of 3500 megahertz band. We initially chose coexisting between two technology, FSS and the IMT, and we are now on the field trial process. By the end of August, we will know how much the guard band that we will need for this band. We are doing field trial for many scenarios, including indoor, outdoor, coexist as well. And next, please. And last week, we conducted the focus group meeting on 6 gigahertz spectrum, and now we open for comment until the end of next month. And we are considering a few options, including IMT, unlicensed, and also private network for this 6 gigahertz band. And next, please. And as I mentioned earlier, in Thailand, there is a National 5G Committee, and this committee was established in May last year. And the objective of the establishment is to promote the 5G implementation in Thailand. And the member committee consists of many economic ministers and chaired by the Prime Minister. And next, please. And the National 5G Committee now approved several 5G pilot projects, including smart hospital, smart agriculture, and so on, as you can see from the slide. And next, please. I would like to share briefly on smart hospital pilot project. Next, please. For this pilot project is organized by Siriraj Hospital. And for Siriraj Hospital, it is the largest public hospital in Thailand. And next, please. And several 5G services will be implemented. They are 5G AI emergency system, unmanned vehicle, and 5G AI diagnostic. For example, a whole project will be complete by the end of this year. Next, please. And the last pilot project that I would like to share today is the smart agriculture. Next, please. For this project, it is organized by Mae Pha Luang Foundation. The 5G technology will be implemented in water and fertilizer management system by using the IoT. A drone will be used for the land investigation and fertilization. We expect to collect massive data and will use data analytics to improve the quality of products as well as improving the plantation techniques. And next, please. And for the 5G, National Committee now, they are considering 5G promotional package to stimulate the use of 5G. Sharing infrastructure and fiber policy are included. Share of the spectrum is also considered in additional investment policy through fiber tax and investment incentive will be considered by the committee as well. So this comes to the end of my presentation, and question will be very welcome.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Pulatonpon. And next, I would like to invite Mr. Stuart Cook. Mr. Stuart Cook, he is the chair of the GSA's Global Spectrum Team and the director of Samsung's Spectrum and Industry Affairs. Previously held a variety of roles, including UK government, Nokia, 4G pioneer startup Flareon Technologies, Qualcomm, and wireless energy harvesting startup Dryson Technologies. With that introduction, I would like to invite Stuart for his presentation. So Stuart, you have the floor.
Thank you, Kondo-san, and thank you, Dan and the team at Forum Global. It really is my pleasure on behalf of the GSA, the Global Suppliers Association, to be able to share our views on 5G spectrum and particularly the evolution of 5G spectrum as we continue to plan for its ongoing success. So next slide, please. I hope you've seen this slide before or maybe something similar, but it's, in my view, worthwhile to just give the higher level, bigger picture in terms of spectrum and the ITU, IMT 5G vision. You know, it's the combination of spectrum from all of the three frequency ranges, the low, the mid, and the high bands that's important. The low bands provides a great coverage layer, helping to get 5G out of the cities into the rural areas, and also provides a really good indoor penetration and continuity of experience within the urban and city areas. The mid bands, it's a great combination of coverage and capacity, and that's where many of the initial 5G networks have been deployed, and then they'll follow up with deployments in the low and the high bands. And the high bands, this ultra experience layer provides a great experience if you're in a stadium or an office or a busy shopping mall, etc., home and enterprise broadband. So it's that combination that's important: coverage, capacity, and the ultra experience layer. Next slide, please. You know, and if we were in the same room physically all together, I suspect I might hear a few groans from some of the regulators in the room. They'll say, you know, the mobile industry, we've only just launched spectrum and already we're beginning to plan for the future and talk about expansion. So in the launch phase, spectrum from the low, the mid and the high bands is really important. But you know, spectrum planning, it takes a long time to get spectrum into the marketplace and in the hands of the operators and the licensees. And so discussions are now beginning to commence about the next phase, what I've called the expansion phase. And then even further out in the very long term, the research community is now beginning to think about the next generation beyond IMT 2020. And so kind of earmarking 2030 for 6G. So we're having launch, and let's begin to think about the future, that continual evolution. Next slide, please. And so as GSA, we thought maybe we would highlight just 3 examples within the region: Australia, China, and Korea. And what about those potential bands that are under consideration or planning in terms of that expansion phase? How about the 37 to 43.5 gigahertz range, the high band spectrum? Could some of that be made available for that future expansion of the high band in Australia? What about 700 megahertz in Korea? Would 700 megahertz provide an opportunity for a great coverage layer and helping alleviate some of the digital divide in some of the rural areas? And as we've heard already, in China, 6 gigahertz is being considered and planned as an expansion band at mid-band, as well as 26 gigahertz in the high band. So a number of options and thoughts in terms of potential bands being planned or under consideration. So next slide, please. You know, and I hope you've seen these statistics before. Don't worry, I'm not going to go through them in great detail, but 438 operators in 133 countries have either trialing, planning, or have launched 5G so far. 166 of those operators in 69 countries have now launched 3GPP compliant 5G services. And if you look in the bottom right hand there, you'll see that phones make around 50% or half of the device that have been announced, and that's what we would expect. But also the home and enterprise broadband, the CPE, a big segment there, industry, vehicles. So it's beginning to emerge, the various device segments and categories. Next slide, please. And then we thought it would be interesting to take a look at some of the frequency bands for 5G that are supported in the devices. So we've taken some examples here. So for example, 700 megahertz in low band, 26 and 28 gigahertz in high bands. And then we've looked at 3 of the mid bands, 2.6, the 3.3 to 4.2 gigahertz range, as well as the 4.4 to 5 gigahertz range. And as you would expect, lots of devices in mid-band, following those, the majority of operators that have now deployed at mid-band, but also high and low bands beginning to increase. And I think if we had this conference in 1 or 2 years' time, there'd be a lot more devices generally, but a lot more in high and low bands as well. Next slide, please. You know, I don't have time, unfortunately, to go through some of the late licensing statistics within the region. Much more information is available in the annex of this presentation, as well as on our website, gsacom.com. But what we can see is a tremendous amount of activity in those 5G frequency bands. And so lots of licensing and deployments now underway. So please do take a look at that at your leisure afterwards. Next slide, please. And again, I'm not going to go through the detail here, but look at the statistics here. I find this quite incredible. As we've heard previously today, 285 million 5G subscribers in China. In Japan, 8,000 millimeter wave base stations, up from 2.3 thousand in September. In Korea, an average 27 gigabytes of data per month. So quite incredible takeoff and deployments and use of 5G in these three example countries. Next slide, please. And so to begin to wrap up, you know, we're in that launch phase. Deployments are well underway, low, mid and high bands. And for those administrations that have not yet licensed, we would urge you to do so that we can realize that IMT, ITU vision. The discussions on the expansion spectrum are now beginning to take place, that very long-term process of what I would call planning for success, and the low bands, the mid bands, as well as the high bands. The upper 6 gigahertz is on the agenda item, and we're active in the sharing studies there. And then in the very longer term, 6G research community targeting 2030. Next slide, please. So on behalf of the GSA, it's been my pleasure to share our views. Let's begin that discussion on planning for future success. And to do that, we'll need to plan for additional spectrum. So thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you, Stuart. I like your conceptualization of 5G launch, 5G expansion, and 6G things. It seems like a simple but good categorization of phases in considering necessary actions. Then next, I would like, last but of course not least, I would like to invite Ms. Zina Mokden for her presentation. She is the Vice President for Regulatory and Market Access at Inmarsat. So she has 20 years of experience in the satellite communications industry, where she successfully championed and introduced a number of pioneering communication technologies globally. She has worked with international communication players and national regulatory agencies worldwide to shape positive regulatory frameworks at the international and national levels. So she is currently co-chair for ITU's Network of Women, now for WRC23. So now NOW, I think Network of Women for WRC23 for the Arab region. With that, I would like to invite Zeina. So Zeina, you have a floor.
Thank you, Kondo-san, and thank you for the introduction as well. Thanks, Dan and Forum Global for this opportunity to participate. I'm delighted to be with my fellow panelists as well. I think, as Kondo-san mentioned, we have a good mix of panelists. I would like to emphasize in my presentation the role of the satellite technology within the ecosystem, what we're doing today, and how we will continue to play in maintaining global leadership and connecting the world in Asia and beyond. For today's discussion, I would like to share Inmarsat's perspective in particular on how best we can deliver and maintain a truly global leadership, but in a network of networks environment. The key word here is really global. We cannot properly save and serve customers and consumers, I think James alluded to it as well, without attending to their needs globally. Consumers today are more demanding, they're more mobile, COVID permitting, of course. consumers don't really ask whether this is 4G, 5G, or XG, in fact. All they want is to be connected to their loved ones and their businesses as and when they need it, no matter where they are, and to feel safe in doing so and as they move across borders. I cannot really foresee a future without a combination of networks and technologies to deliver just that, with satellite really being a main piece to the puzzle. If we go to the next one, please. Thank you. So Inmarsat came into being 40 years ago with a clear mission of saving lives at sea. This has been our core business and remains at the heart of what we do. Now, over the years, we have expanded to serve customers beyond the seas while addressing their ever-increasing capacity needs. One of the things we learned from the COVID-19 experience last year was that there is a heightened need for resilient connectivity and affordable access as well, wherever we are, whether it's people stranded at sea or for businesses as well in remote areas. This means we urgently need to extend the broadband connectivity into all corners of the globe, whether it is remote, rural, underserved, or indeed for those global trade routes. Today, almost half of the world population remains unconnected. And this digital inequality has to be addressed, but that also includes satellite communications as one of its core pillars. Next one, please. Thank you. So Inmarsat has been preparing for this digital transformation for years, in fact. We've started, and that was back in 2010 when we took a leap of faith and augmented our L-band resilience with KA capabilities to complement our offerings. Today, Inmarsat has a fleet of 14 satellites with unique long-term commitment to safety services, multiple complementary networks in different frequency bands, in-orbit redundancy, a global coverage, with a network that is specifically built for mobility. Next one, please. Thank you. Now, in 2013, we launched our first Global Express Ka-band satellite, which was followed by the remainder of the fleet to give us a truly global high-speed network with seamless coverage. The good part here is that we also have another 7 satellites that will be launched in the next 3 years, 2 of which will have dual L-band and Ka-band capacity, another 2 with polar coverage, and 3 more with dynamic capacity and flexible coverage. We can go to the next one, please. This one really is just to say, these are the markets that we serve. I'll go in a bit more detail in a bit, but all of these satellites, current and future, rely on the 28 gigahertz Ka-band to serve our 4 key markets, whether it's maritime, aviation, enterprise, or government, and this is globally and, of course, in the Asia-Pacific region. Next one, please. Thank you. If we take the example of, and this is really to maybe emphasize Dr. Pratompong's view on the farming aspect, for example, and in the agriculture, we've seen satellite networks, because they have global broadband coverage, they can allow IoT to be provided in really remote areas where terrestrial cannot access, whether it's for agriculture, mining, transportation, and logistics, all of which are really crucial sectors in the Asia-Pacific region. In the context of agriculture, in particular, the satellite IoT applications would provide farmers with precision farming, and they can monitor the crop fields with the health of the crop, the moisture, soil moisture, temperature, or humidity as well, with the help of sensors. Similar satellite applications find their way as well in the mining industry, among others. Next one, please. Thank you. Now, if we move to the maritime world, satellite broadband connectivity allows vessel tracking, which is critical for port management, real-time access to latest fishing reports, oceanographic data tracking applications to monitor the movement of ships and associated ports and infrastructure. Satellite capacity can also be and will be key to extending the 5G backhauling into more remote areas. Satellites in general provide high bandwidth, ubiquitous service beyond the cities and unreachable areas. These are to support data delivery at the edge and enabling network availability for communications on moving platforms. Now, beyond the 5G backhauling, the satellite systems can support a wide range of new 5G applications, such as the connected vehicles and autonomous driving, and that Stuart was alluding to as well. They can efficiently support firmware or software over the air, updates, map updates, and real-time traffic conditions and parking availability. Next slide, please. Now, all of these applications can be made possible by satellite terminals, using satellite terminals that we refer to within the ITU as Earth Stations in Motion, or eSIM. eSIM have been recognized by the ITU in its World Radio Conference back in 2015 through Resolution 156 to allow eSIM to operate in the bands 19.7 to 20.2 gigahertz and the 29.5 to 30 gigahertz. Since then, since it's been implemented, we have seen significant demand for broadband connectivity by passengers and crew, including for operational reasons. Inmarsat is addressing this demand through the Global Express eSIMs, which are now available on more than 700 aircraft, and we have 1,700 more contracted and on more than 10,000 vessels out there. Next one, please. Thank you. Thanks. Now, because of this increased demand for satellite connectivity, the satellite industry, including Inmarsat, has been really relying on Ka-band. And indeed, following the 2015 WRC, back in 2019, the ITU, in its latest WRC cycle, has reaffirmed the global need for the bands 17.7 to 19.7 gigahertz and 27.5 to 29.5 gigahertz that we've been referring to as 28 gigahertz. And this is really for the FSS community through the adoption of ITU Resolution 169 that allows eSIM to operate with the necessary, of course, operating technical and regulatory parameters. Now, the 28 gigahertz band is a primary one for FSS. This band was not included in the candidate bands studied back then. And again, it was a global recognition of its importance to the FSS community and the applications. And we've seen eSIM as being part of it. We have the VSAT and satellite gateways as well. The Ka-band is really a vital one for the satellite industry, and it is vital that the regulators would protect this band from any potential encroachment. For us to be able to continue to provide these services now and in the future, we need spectrum certainty at the very least, and this is done through the ITU proceedings in addition to national implementation. I come to my last slide, please, now. Thank you. All right, now, I'd like to close by adding that the satellite technologies, as you may know, extend the reach of communication solutions globally. This is not just rural and remote areas, but also onto the world's skies and oceans, the latter being 70% of the planet. These global and maritime and aviation trade routes cannot be served in any other way. They rely uniquely on satellite communications. And the same applies for governments that are seeking unique capabilities, coverage, and resilience. In order to respond to this demand in a truly digital world, we have to ensure there is stable and supported regulatory framework with spectrum certainty to allow these industries to grow. Now, as we speak today, and as we've seen from my fellow panelists as well, regulators in the region are considering their plans for the 28 gigahertz. In doing so, we urge the regulators to adhere to international identified spectrum bands, as their decisions will be essential to provide certainty and growth. It is vital that spectrum demands are considered for all different stakeholders in a fair and balanced way. And as James put it, it is a fine balancing act, but we look forward to working with them in meeting the Asia-Pacific region connectivity demands. I would like to thank Forum Global and my fellow panelists for giving me the opportunity today to contribute. And I invite the audience as well to visit our showcase session on Thursday as well, if they wish to know more about our services. I'll stop here for now, but happy to take questions afterwards. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Zeina, for your presentation. Now, I would like to thank all panelists as well as audience. We got so many questions from audience. Thank you very much for your questions. The questions covers so many issues like demand, supply, industry, or government aspect, like a fair competition or incentive for investment, or how to serve to ultimately how to serve to consumers, or rather specific questions such as how much guard we need, or price of a spectrum, blah, blah, blah. So many questions. Thank you very, very much for your questions. So still we have 15 to 20 minutes for discussions. So Zeina, you just finished, so our mind is very much related to your presentation. So let me pick up the question. The question is this: as a global satellite operator, how does the current spectrum outlook in the region support your growth plans? What do you think?
Yes, thank you, Kondo-san. So yes, for me, in fact, and as you've seen in the presentation, global is quite key. So the Asia Pacific region in particular is one that is data hungry, not just from a consumer base of satellite, but also from the terrestrial side. The regulators at the moment, they are considering how to respond to this ever-increasing demand for spectrum. But I would really hope, given the 17 gigahertz that were assigned back in the ITU WRC cycle, and the last one, as Mario as well as mentioned, that for me, whatever was agreed at the ITU is a really good basis for us to work together and to support a holistic network of networks that would allow different technologies to strive and grow together. So the spectrum outlook at the moment is shifting away a little bit from the ITU, but we'd like to bring it back to the ITU if possible and work with regulators and the industry to make it happen. Thank you, Kondo-san.
Yeah, thank you, Zeina. Of course, there always, if you just add all the demand from the industry, the demand is always bigger than the supply. Absolutely. So in that aspect, I would like to pick up another question which relates to the government side, like a policy or regulatory side. So I would like to ask James about this question. The question is, how does the ACMA as a spectrum regulator work to ensure optimal balances in planning and allocation among the diverse demands of all spectrum users? What do you think?
Thank you, Kondo-san. Look, it's a very interesting and challenging question. As I said in my remarks, we see that careful and detailed engagement with our stakeholders to test the robustness of our internal analysis is critical to that work. In helping us develop our regulatory work program and our decisions for over a decade, the ACMA has developed a 5-year spectrum outlook, or FISO as we call it, and it's been the cornerstone of our consultative and strategic management of spectrum in Australia. The FISO is an integrated business and planning tool that assists the ACMA to improve spectrum management functions by providing greater insight and transparency into spectrum users, or for spectrum users, about the demand for spectrum, and setting out the ACMA's strategic direction and priorities for the next 5 years. Consultation is a critical part of how we develop our FISO. We invite feedback on the draft of the detailed work program that will follow over the next 12 months, and we publish progress reports to show the status of those activities. And beyond that work program level, we seek to be transparent and consultative in our more detailed planning decisions. It's through the testing, as I said, of our internal analysis with all stakeholders that we can gain confidence in the robustness of our decisions. When considering revising band plans, we progress through four clear stages: monitoring of domestic and global technology and demand changes, initial investigation and revised planning options when there's evidence that changed or more optimal arrangements may be appropriate, replanning decision-making, having tested with industry key options against clearly articulated desirable planning outcomes, and finally implementation. And in each stage of these processes, we engage on relevant technical, economic and social considerations that may impact on the decision points. There are fewer and fewer easy planning decisions in spectrum management as demand for spectrum increases and technology cycles become quicker. But if we can bring to bear appropriate expertise across multiple disciplines, technical, economic and public policy, we put ourselves in the best position to deliver good outcomes, I think.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, James. I think that's a very broad perspective as regulators and policy makers. So I think industry side needs to understand how government's mindset as well. So with those rather big pictures question, let me pick up some like a specific question. The question is to Miss Jen. The question is this: which specific segment of 6 gigahertz band is under consideration for IMT? Certainly, it seems like there are several other questions which relate to 6 gigahertz, like allocation things in China. So allow me to pick up the questions. Pick up this question again. The question is: which specific segment of 6 gigahertz band is under consideration for IMT?
Thank you, Komisar. And I think that it's nowadays we have two things to ongoing. One is to revising our national frequency planning table, and as I have present that it has a long time to preparation before the deployment of 5G. We need a long time. So as during our revising work, there are some mobile network operators suggested that to revising the frequency band from 5925 to 7125 megahertz band with identification of IMT, because this is just to identification for 5G, not means that the development or in the future. So we are still considering to accept this kind of advice, and it's still and evaluating now. And for the segment of 6 gigs for the trial, I think that maybe the question is based on something like that. We think that it depends on the scenarios and the detailed applications. But since it is limited to users, so we think we still evaluating. I think that when we finish the evaluation work, we will make the decision that how much or which specific segment frequency band we can do some test now. Thank you.
Okay, and thank you, Fan-Chen-san, for your explanation. Then let me go on. Next question is specifically to NBTC. So Dr. Polatonpon, I would like to pick up this question to you. The question is, please clarify NBTC plans on 28 gigahertz and how do you intend to protect incumbent services, including FSS?
Yes, thank you very much for the very, very challenging question. Basically, right now, NBTC is just hiring a consultant to plan on this for auction as well. So we understand that 28 gigahertz band are being used by the FSS operator as well. So if we would like to take some to do 26 gigahertz that we already did for the last year, maybe we need to facing with the interference between FSS and IDIMT, but is now under study from the consultant, and the expected output, I would say maybe sometime in October, we would know the detail of how should we do with the 28 gigahertz band. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So now I picked up 4 questions. So to be fair, let me ask another question to Stuart. So I think specifically to Stuart, yes, the question is this one. When do we expect 5G standalone network rollout, given today we have 4G or LTE being utilized as pseudo 5G with carrier allegation for high data speeds. Namely, simply, I think question is, isn't it too early to be talking about expansions of spectrum for 5G? So what do you think?
Thank you, Kondo-san. So, as I said, we're still very much in that launch phase, so that the spectrum is being licensed, the networks are being initially deployed. A lot of networks at 3.5, but also now 26, 28, 700, for example. So in terms of the numbers, I think that was the question. As I said, 438 operators are now planning, either trialing or deploying. 166 have deployed. And out of those, 76 operators have now investing in standalone. So there's a clear trend to investment in standalone and then deployment in standalone. So that's the technology. In terms of the spectrum, is it too early to talk about expansion? You know, some of the operators, Australia, I guess from James, is they have a technology neutral approach. So their existing assets can be used for 4G, 5G, etc. But in terms of the additional bands, you know, it takes a long time. So I think now is the right time to begin to plan for the success, whether that's 2023, 25, closer to 2030, but now is the right time to have those expansion phase discussions. Thank you, Kondo-san.
Yeah, thank you. Yes. Yeah, as I said, I think the concept of expansion, concept of launch, expansion, and the next stage is, I think, simple but a good way to consider and summarize our own understanding. So next question is with regard to spectrum sharing. So I think I'd like to ask James. The question is this. So what role can spectrum sharing play in meeting the competing needs for 5G and other spectrum users? And another question which related to this question, you may include in your answer. Another question is that is spectrum sharing allowed between multiple operators? So those are two questions which relate to spectrum sharing. So James.
My apologies, I made the usual mistake of leaving myself on mute. Thank you, Kondo-san. I'll try and address both of those questions. I think there's a rich and ongoing global discussion about spectrum sharing, which often has a particular interest in dynamic sharing models. As all national spectrum managers, the possibilities of new approaches to spectrum sharing are something that we at the ACMA have been keeping a close eye on for a number of years. And while we are yet to find the killer application for new sharing approaches, such as dynamic access techniques, we are enthusiastically looking for the right solution. I think it's worth, however, taking a step back quickly and reflecting a little bit on the why of sharing rather than the how. The key point being that sharing is a means to an end. It's not an objective in itself. Broadly speaking, we collectively seek to obtain utility from the optimal utility from a spectrum resource. In Australia, we've traditionally called this maximising the overall public benefit. But I suspect many nations have similar objectives. Our key to delivering this utility is to achieve coexistence between different users, and we've heard a number of comments about that between fixed, mobile and satellite uses, as well as between users, that is, different licensees. So sharing is what allows coexistence. And of course, therefore, sharing is not new. It's always been fundamental to spectrum management. What is changing are the tools that we have available to share spectrum, moving from traditionally largely static models to new, more non-traditional dynamic arrangements. Importantly, the most appropriate sharing approach will depend on the circumstances. We can see an approach to sharing that is fit for an intended purpose, informed by planning and policy decisions that balance the associated complexity and financial costs with the benefits. We've yet to see in the Australian context an opportunity to implement dynamic sharing techniques that meet the reasonable user requirements of both primary and secondary users, and as well stacks up from a cost-benefit perspective. Nevertheless, recent planning work that we've done has been able to create approaches that enable the coexistence of satellite and terrestrial broadband services across 2 gigahertz of millimetre wave bands in the 28 gigahertz band. And in the C band, we are moving to open up more spectrum for terrestrial wireless broadband, but in a way which includes both exclusive and shared access arrangements between incumbent and fixed licensees. But just on the specific issue of sharing between operators, in the Australian environment, licensees of spectrum are able to share their spectrum with other users through commercial arrangements. So it is possible, and there are a number of examples where licensees have made their spectrum available on a commercial basis to other operators. But more generally, our planning arrangements are designed to achieve the optimal outcome for particular bands, and where possible, that involves sharing and coexistence between different users and different users.
Okay, okay, thank you. Now we just got another question. The question is this, which is, I think, interesting and important. The question is, it seems that different countries are taking different approaches. How important is it that APAC region takes a coordinated and harmonized approach to maintain global leadership, as the session title says? I think this is a very good point. So here, I think the answer could be from government or from industry or from both sides, but we don't have so much time. Let me ask Zina for your perspective on this question from in the industry side.
Great, thank you, Kondo-san, and I love the question, to be honest, because it does reflect the title, but also the fact that I think we all agree that we need a harmonized approach. The angle I would like to stress on, though, is not because of economies of scale, because economies of scale you may realize in large jurisdictions, large countries. This is not really what we are after, and I think a number of my fellow panelists would agree. We are looking at what is best for the consumer, what is best for the citizens in general. And from a satellite perspective, this is really crucial, because even if you have a regional satellite operator, you still need some form of harmonized approach. You certainly don't want to be on a plane going from one country to the other and having a different customer experience, and certainly not when it comes to safety as well. So this is extremely important, and this is where, again, in my presentation, I stressed the ITU angle, and I think we all agree that we would like to work together to make this happen as well. I hope I've answered the question from my perspective.
No.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dina, for your thought. And as a APT, of course, we think that it's very important, and we are always trying our best to provide a good discussion platform for members from any backgrounds. So with that, we just come to the time, and if you have any last minute word, you can say something. But if not, I would like to close the session. So is there any final comment? Okay, so with that, thank you very much for your time and for your participant. And I'm sure that looking at so many questions coming in, I'm sure that the audience enjoyed very much. So please join me in thanking prominent panelists for their good presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So back to you, Dan.
Sorry, Kondo-san. Thank you very much, Kondo-san. And I would like to echo the thanks to all of our panelists for a really interesting session there. And also, Kondo-san, to you for an excellently moderated session as well. So thank you very much. And of course, as Kondo-san has mentioned, to all of you out there as well in the audience for all of the questions. So we had a really good number of questions there, which really is appreciated. And it does make things a lot more interactive and things when we have questions in that way. So thank you all so much for that. And I think we managed to get round to most of those. So really do appreciate your involvement as well. But an excellent way to kick things off with the event. So we now have a short break. So we have a break for 45 minutes or so. But what I would like to invite you all to do now, during this break, for the first 10 minutes or so of the break, please, I would like to invite you all to go and use the networking part of the panel, of the platform, sorry. So please do go onto the networking area, which you can access on the left-hand menu bar. If you click on the button there to connect, you'll be connected with somebody else from the audience. And that will enable you to have a short conversation with them, and then to decide whether or not you want to exchange business cards. So please do that for the next 10 minutes or so. I invite you all to go and use the networking area on the left-hand side of the panel, left-hand side of the platform, sorry. And then following that, we do have a break, but we're back here in around about 45 minutes time on the main stage at 3:30 local Bangkok time, where we're going to be moving on to the second session, which is going to be looking at the rise of private 5G networks and looking at different models for meeting vertical connectivity. But for now, once again, a massive thank you to all of our panelists for that first session, and of course, again, to Kondo-san. Please do go and use the networking area, and then we're looking forward to seeing you back here in about 45 minutes for the next session. So thank you very much.